And that particular organization, you know, up until I was 6, he was with those guys, rode with those guys, those brothers. I remember them coming to our house, and the streets would be dead quiet. No kids playing, no people going out or in the neighborhood. All these motorcycles parked on our front lawn. And when I was 6 years old, this is me at 6 years old, my dad had a bit of an epiphany. He realized that he could not participate in that lifestyle and have a family. And so you were not allowed to quit, but you could move. So he moved us to a little tiny town right on the border of Idaho and Utah. If you go to this place, it's primarily white. If you can't find me here, might have a problem. But we lived in this little tiny town, just one little farming community, one stoplight. If you've seen the movie Napoleon Dynamite, I lived about 15 minutes from where that was filmed. Wow. That was an interesting documentary. But after living there for the first year that we were there, the brothers came by quite often. Second year, a few of them came by. Third year, only a couple of the brothers came by. Fourth year, nobody came by. Fifth year, nobody came by. By the time we were there for 5 years, everyone that my dad knew in the Sacramento chapter of the notorious motorcycle gang was either dead or in prison. So we moved to Southern California, and I lived there until I was 19 years old. But the damage of living in this tiny, inbred, ignorant community had been done. I was very insecure about being racial, not just racially mixed, but about my own culture. At 19 years old, I moved here. That's me at 19. Thanks. You can tell what era it is because I'm wearing biking shorts and a fanny pack. So it was through Hawaiian culture that I rediscovered my own roots, and I was spending a lot of time. This is actually taken up here in the Manoa watershed. Wasn't supposed to be up there, but I was. I was spending a lot of time on Big Island in Keaukaha, which is Hawaiian homelands. And a lot of the aunties there, oh, here's this nice Hapa young man. He's from the mainland. Let's re-educate him about Hawaiian culture. They assumed I was part Hawaiian. And I learned a couple of things. One, when the aunties are talking, you do not interrupt. You shut your mouth. And that if I shut my mouth, I would learn about Hawaiian culture. So they would educate me. And one day this auntie, she pulls me aside. She goes, hey, Lane, you know what the true meaning of aloha is? And I'm like, I don't know. She says, well, it's 2 words. It's alo, to go with, or to share, and ha, the breath of life. And she went up to me and she sniffed me. And I'm like, okay, that's strange. But then I had a flashback to my grandmother. When she would come over from the Philippines, that was the first thing that she would do. She'd come through the door, she'd grab my face, and she would sniff me. She would inhale the breath of life with me. And so I thought, well, at this time, when I was in Hawaii, you didn't see that in the open. You didn't see that in public. Maybe if you were in a hula halau, maybe you might see someone doing a honi, pressing noses, inhaling the breath of life together. But in the Philippines, we still had the practice among the old people, but we had lost the meaning behind it. In Ilocano, we call this ongo. And it doesn't sound like honi, it doesn't sound like aloha, but if you know the genealogy of that word, then you see that it's related. So real quick, if you'll indulge me, this is our word for that practice. I'm spelling it phonetically. Ongi. In Hawaiian, it's honi. I talked to a Maori man, and he said, oh yeah, we do the sniffy kiss thing too. We call that hongi. I'm like, okay, now I can see the relationship here. Whoops, I missed. I can see the relationship here, but how does it get to here? And he said, what's your word for it? I said, ongo. He said, oh, that's like the North tribes of New Zealand. They don't pronounce the H, they just say ongi. So now you can see that they're related. And my mind was blown. I'm like, holy crap. There's a relationship here between all these different islands. And so one of the things that I want you to do tonight is decolonize the way you think about the Pacific. All these boundaries that Western anthropologists and people who do, cartographers have done. Okay, this is the Polynesian Triangle. This is over here is Micronesia, and down here is Melanesia, because those people are darker, and these islands are small, so they're Micronesians. These people down here in Indonesia, they got a Hindu influence, so we're going to call them Indonesians. Philippines, those guys are kind of weird, and they're in, in kind of near Asia, so it's Southeast Asia. When you're sailing in a canoe, there is no border. You don't come to a magical line that says, now leaving Polynesia, entering Micronesia. The ocean is a superhighway. And if Hokulea, if you guys are familiar with Hokulea, has proven anything, it's that people could get around. And they did so purposefully. So let us decolonize our way of thinking about the Pacific and see things as the daughter expressions of a cultural whole. And we're going to talk about that quite a bit. So here's a little test. Who knows the Filipino word for I? Rachel? Papa? Who knows the Tahitian word for I? Anyone know the Samoan word for I? Tongan, Chamorro, Hawaiian. What's Hawaiian? Maka. Oh, wow. That's really similar, isn't it? Here's the primordial parents throughout the Pacific. Again, if you know the transitions, you have in the Philippines, laki and babae. You drop the E, Southern Maori is raki and papa, baba and papa. Then rangi and papa, rangi atea and papa, drop the rangi atea and papa, Hawaiian wakea and papa. Everyone's claiming descent from the first parent, the same first parents. The problem is that the Philippines was colonized much earlier than the rest of the Pacific, nearly 500 years ago. So the damage that's been done to our culture is much more extensive. This is one of our other gods, Angalo. You go to Vanuatu, Tagaro, Takaro, Tangaloa, Tangaroa, Ta'aroa, Tanaoa, Kanaloa, Loa, Loalangi, same god. So, I got involved with tattooing trying to do research, trying to figure out, I want a traditional tattoo, but I don't want to take something that's not mine. This is Sua Suluape Aleova'a, sometimes known as Patella Suluape. He began my journey into becoming a practitioner. I began by stretching for him while he tattooed. I also was tutored by this man, who is actually Lopaka's cousin, and the cousin of Kili'i Makua, who was here last night speaking about Hawaiian tattoos, Keone Nunes, who is a good friend and a great teacher for me as well, helped me reconstruct some of the Filipino tattoos that the Samoans were not able to do, because the Hawaiian tattoos are big, long lines on the body, and in some parts of the Philippines we have big, long lines on the body as well. These are 2 books that I've written. That's my shameless plug for tonight. Filipino Tattoos, Ancient to Modern, and Forgotten Children of Maui. You can get them at Namea Hawaii or on Amazon, like everything else under the sun. And so, I don't want to do my whole superhero, origin story, but I became a cultural practitioner. Let's talk tattoos. Tattooing is a tradition in the Philippines that is literally thousands of years old. These are men from 1905 in some of the highlands of the Philippines, where they remained uncolonized, unchristianized up into the 20th century. If you look at some of those designs, you might think, oh, those kind of look like Polynesian. I showed this particular picture to my Samoan teacher, Suluape, and he said, oh, that looks like ours, but instead of having them over the hips, like the pe'a, it's up higher. He saw the connection immediately. These are Visayan men from the Central Islands of the Philippines. This is a picture from this is from a manuscript dated at 1590 from a document called the Boxer Codex, and they are covered head to toe. And if you looked at that at first glance, you might think that looks kind of Tahitian. This is a mummy from the Benguet region of the Philippines. He is covered from head to toe. And these mummies are dated anywhere from 500 to 1,000 years old. The oldest artifacts that we have in the Philippines are the tools that have been found in burial caves that have been carbon dated at anywhere from 35 to nearly 4,000 years old. So we have a tattooing tradition that is literally thousands of years old. But at the present time, this is actually the original name the Spanish gave our islands, Las Islas de los Pintados, the islands of the painted people, the tattooed people. But nearly 500 years of foreign occupation and colonization has nearly exterminated this cultural practice. There are approximately 120 million Filipinos and people of Filipino descent in the world. There are less than 10 known practitioners. This is our eldest practitioner, Aloha. She is 102 years old. And I was fortunate enough to meet her and be tattooed by her. She's still tattooing here and there to this day. Beautiful woman. So, how do tattoos relate to spirits? Well, to do that, we got to talk about God. I mean, well, that scared you, right? I knock on your door. Can I share a message about Jesus? So we first have to understand the hierarchy of spirits in our tradition. First, there's the Supreme Being. And under that Supreme Being are various classes of spirits. There are embodied spirits, which are humans. And then there are non-human spirits that are malevolent entities. They're not people that you want to deal with. In Ilocano, we call these mangmangkik. They're bad people, and they do bad things. You don't want to associate with them. Bad stuff happens with them. Then you have nature spirits. Ancient Filipinos were animists. They believe everything has a soul. Everything has power and has a soul. Animals, plants, stones, etc. And then you have disembodied spirits, which we call anito or anito, that are ancestor spirits. Now, these guys you want to deal with because they have a vested interest in your welfare. They're family, right? They want to see you succeed. Unless you got that one crazy uncle, right? But the ancestor spirits, they communicate heart to heart, mind to mind. They're that inner voice that's inside of you. The voice that says when you're driving down the freeway, oh, you better take Liki Liki, right? Or you better get off on the earlier exit. And sometimes we listen, sometimes we don't, right? We always know when we don't because then we hit traffic, we're late for our appointment, the kids are waiting for us at the school or whatever, and we're like, I should have taken that earlier exit. So we don't always pay attention. So the ancestor spirits, which we call Anitu, which is related to the Samoan word for spirits or household gods as Aitu or Aitu, similar to the Hawaiian concept of Amakua, they can influence these nature spirits, and they will manifest themselves in a particular form. An animal form usually, although there are stones and trees that are associated with that as well. So some of the common forms, the animal forms of the Anitu are snakes, birds, crocodiles, centipedes, lizards. Think about that when you see these big centipedes around. In fact, crocodiles are interesting. They're a big part of that, but because their behavior is very similar to the Hawaiian mo'o. Not the little lizard on the wall, the mo'o that lives in the water, the dragon-like lizard that drowns people. Their behavior is very similar to that. And we call crocodiles nono, which literally means ancestor. Okay, so here we have a tattooed man. And let's say, so this is how it works, the interaction with these spirits. This is how it works. So let's say that he's traveling to another village. And while he's traveling, ancestor's trying to get a hold of him. The Anito is saying, hey, you shouldn't go to that village. There's a bunch of enemy warriors up ahead. But he's going there to court some girl. Whoa, she's so pretty. And ancestors are like, send. She's so beautiful. What am I gonna do? What am I gonna say? Not listening. So he's walking right into an enemy ambush. We gotta do something. Let's send one of our representatives, one of our animal forms, to cross his path. Dun, dun, dun. Now, you guys only got that little tiny worm-like snake in Hawaii, right? But in the Philippines, we have pythons. And I guarantee if one of those things crosses your path, you're gonna pay attention. The snake crosses the path, or the bird crosses the path. Another one of these omen animals are owls, which in our language is, in Maori, in Hawaiian, oh, that's kind of similar. So one of the animal forms crosses the path. He recognizes that animal form. Oh, that's the form of my ancestor. What does he do now? His job is to observe the omen event, speak or pray to the ancestor. Some places they actually address the snake as if it was their grandfather or grandmother. What is it you want me to know? And then he stills his heart, his mind, and allows that inspiration to come. Go home, there's enemy warriors. Go home, your pigs are loose. Go home, you left the stove on. And so, once he has that message, his job is to obey that voice. See, people will come to me and they'll say, oh, Lane, I heard that this one design means protection. I want to be protected. Can I have that? I said, well, we could tattoo it, but it's not going to stop a bullet. What protects you is this. It's what the tattoo represents. And it's like a covenant between you and your ancestors that you will pay more attention to them and they will pay more attention to you. It's like when you get a call on your phone, there's no caller ID, like, who the hell is this? And you pick up the phone, hello? Hey, Lane, that was so dope the other night. Yeah, bro. What's this? We don't always recognize who's calling at first, but then eventually you talk to them. Dave. Okay. All right, cool. And you become familiar with that voice. And soon that voice becomes clearer and clearer. So it's not just, I have a bad feeling about going somewhere. It's specific information. You need to do this. You need to go talk to that person at work because it's going to lead to a promotion. This is what you do to fix your sink at home. All these very specific information. So, listen. Now, what does this have to do with tattoos? This is one of the tattoo designs that you see on this man's chest here. You see down at the bottom? What does that look like to you? Snake scales, right? One of the names for this is Minmanata, taken from the word mata, which we learned means eyes. Okay? The idea is additional awareness. Some places they put little dots in each of these little hexagons, and now it becomes anthropomorphic. It becomes little stick figures of people all interwoven together, holding each other up. The idea is that you have a multitude of spirits, a multitude of ancestors watching over you, supporting you, making you aware. And if you have the symbol of the Anito on your body, is there any need for that ancestor to manifest itself in its animal form? No, it's already before you. It's already there. It's as if the omen event is continuous. And that's why I say it's like a covenant or a contract between you and your ancestors. I will pay more attention to you, and you will pay more attention to me. So overall, this design that you see on this man's chest, let's talk about that. That's some pretty extensive tattooing, right? So what does this overall design represent? It is a token of headhunting and of a god named Lumawi. This is what it has to do with. Now we get into the juicy stuff, guys. Headhunting. Yes, Filipinos were headhunters. Some still are. In some of the remote areas in the highlands, there's still stories that heads are taken when offenses are committed. And contrary to popular belief, it wasn't just the Igorot people. Everybody headhunted in the Philippines. Tagalogs were headhunters. Ilocanos were headhunters. Any Ilocanos here? Yeah, Ilocanos were headhunters. Kapapangans were headhunters. Visayans were headhunters. Everybody headhunted. So who is this Lumawi? We're going to have a little bit more fun. This name carries some interesting information. This is the root word of the name, Lawig, or Lawig. Anyone know what that means? Anyone speak Ilocano? Lawig, or Lawin? Lawig in Ilocano means hook. It can also mean hawk. In Cebuano, it means voyage, or it's a figurative term towards one of our ancient outrigger canoes that was 100 feet long, carried a complement of 100 paddlers, called a karakoa. But hook, hawk, or to voyage, or canoe. Lawig, in its conjugated form, is lumawig, which means to continue on. Lalawigan is what we use for a municipality now, like you might, or a province, but anciently meant to drop anchor. Some of the major differences between Polynesian languages and Filipino languages is that we have vowel closing consonants on the end of our words. So for example, you have a term like coconut in the Philippines is nyog. You drop the G, nyu. That's the Polynesian word. That's the Hawaiian word. So what happens with lawig, or lumawig, this is another spelling of it. If I drop the G, lumawi. Oh. Oh. What is this cartoon character carrying? A hook. What does he turn into? A hawk. And what does he teach Moana how to do? High five the sky. Voyage. Thank you for letting me do that. So let's go back to headhunting. Anyone know what these leaves are right here? Who can identify those leaves?
Tea leaves.
They're tea leaves. The Howley gets it.
He's psychic.
I can dance with a little bit too. I quit though. Wasn't for me.
Why do you think there are tea leaves all around the severed head? Why do Hawaiians use tea leaves? Protection. From what? Spirits. So, to tell you about this tattoo, to tell you about this tradition involved, this tradition is also associated with Lumawig or Maui, I have to tell you a story. So, long time ago, Lumawig or Maui is sitting on the village and he's being lazy. He's just lounging, enjoying himself. And the women of the village, they come up to him and say, hey, stop being lazy. Get up and go do something. So he gets up, says, I guess I'll go headhunting then. You know, gets his head axe, gets a party of warriors together. They travel for a few days down to the enemy territory. And when they come to near the village outskirts, a warrior comes out from that village named Dinig. And they insult each other. They throw curses at each other. And then they throw spears at each other. Lumawig penetrates his body with several spears. Dinig falls to the ground. Swiftly, Lumawig sweeps down, grabs him by the head of the hair, and cuts off his head. And as he holds the head up to do the victory shout, to his shock, Dinig's head shouts with him. This is not normal. He drops the head, quickly digs a hole, puts the head inside while it's still blinking and looking at him, and buries it. They take off. They go back home. 2 years go by. And Lumawig's sitting around the village going, he's still haunted by it. I wonder what happened to that thing? I wonder if it's still alive. So he discreetly leaves, travels down the trails through the mountains, and he gets to the place where he had buried the head of Dinig. And to his surprise, there's a tree growing up from it. He picks one of the fruits, husks it, opens it, and sees on the end of the coconut a face. This is the face of Dinig. Now this same story is found in Samoa. In Samoa, and there's also, I believe there's a similar story in Hawaii. In Samoa, Maui has a daughter or a wife or a sister named Sina. And Sina one day goes down from the village to a pool of water. And while she's bathing in the water, she sees in the water a very large eel. It frightens her. She climbs back up onto the bank of the pool, and to her surprise and shock, the eel wiggles up on land and transforms into a handsome man, named not Dinig, but Tuna, a similar name. Tuna entices her. Come, get in the water with me. Come on. She goes into the water. And the literal translation from Samoan to English is, he pierced her with his tail. Do I need to explain this to you? She goes home crying. Now there are romanticized versions of this, fairy tale versions of this, where it's her lover. No, this was a violation. She goes home. Maui becomes enraged and goes on the head hunt. Chases Tuna throughout the islands, finally catches up with him, cuts off his head, and the very same thing, buries the head. Sina weeps over the grave. And out from the grave grows a coconut tree. Now, how does this story relate to chest tattoos? Like you see on this lakai right here. Well, when we headhunt, headhunting is a form of ritual warfare. It's a way to minimize the loss of life. If there is an open battle, usually after 3 people go down, maybe 4 people go down in an outright battle, and their heads are taken, the winning side says to the losing side, you guys, you've had enough. Our anger is satisfied. Go home. Let the shedding of blood stop. There's no more need for us to take any more lives. And so the loss of life is kept to a minimum. The heads are taken back to the village where we would hold a kanyao. Some places they call it a pito, but a kanyao is kind of like a luau, but with severed heads. There's feasting, there's dancing. The heads are taken and they're put in basketry that's lined with red hibiscus flowers. All the eligible bachelors that were on the headhunting expedition get to wear red hibiscus behind their ears. It says, I'm available. And I am a strong, capable warrior. Think about that next time you put a flower behind your ear. Gentlemen. Then the kanyao has storytelling, there's dancing, there's feasting, and it's not just to honor the warriors, it's to honor the people who have died. It's to honor the souls of the heads. Because of their sacrifice, their human sacrifice, the shedding of blood has stopped. Then those heads are taken and they are buried for 2 years. At the end of the 2-year period, the women of the village will come and claim the skulls. What they do with the skulls, they hold their own rituals with those skulls. I don't know what those rituals are, but I suspect it has to do something with what the Samoans remember about this incident. And that, after that happens, that is when the coconut tree grows up on the man's chest. These are the fronds of the coconut tree. This is the trunk of the body, and these are the leaves. So the chest tattoo is to honor the soul who has died. It's to honor your enemy. It's a way of addressing PTSD that our soldiers don't have nowadays. And Lopaka and I have talked about how veterans, they come back from warfare, they come back hating their enemy, they come back with all this trauma. There's no way to address that ceremonially. It's just, well, let's put you on some drugs and let you talk to a few shrinks. This is a way to mitigate that, to take care of that and make things, in Hawaiian, pono again. Now, this is another example of chest tattoos, and there's some interesting ones in this one, right here. What does that look like to you? These little guys right here. There's 4 of them. What do you think that is? I'll give you hints. An animal. Cat? Good guess. Not a cat. Dog. It's a dog. They're dog tattoos. I've had people see these images and they'll go home and, oh, you know what? I love dogs. I'll get these dog tattoos on me. You don't want these dog tattoos on you. These are for ghosts. the ghosts of people who've had their heads taken. Among the Ifugao people of Luzon, when they take a head, they do the honoring of the soul, but they go one step further. What they do is they take the head and they strip all the flesh from it. And then they build something that's called a pinokla, that's also called a kinaho. The kinaho is in the rough shape of a dog. Now, you know how people joke around about how Filipinos are dog eaters, right? Dogs were ceremonial food. They were eaten only in this context anciently, to honor the soul of a dead person. But it's a little bit more sinister. By constructing the kinaho, which is this here, and these are the animals that were sacrificed, and then this is the skull of the victim. And it's bound to this board that is in the rough shape of a dog, very stylized. With the dalung rite they perform, they bind the soul of the dead to that board. The headhunter takes the board home, and that soul is bound to him. That those two are now companions until he passes. There are stories of Maui in New Zealand turning his brother-in-law into a dog for offending him. Maybe that's the origin of this story. Back when a time when you could enslave or bind a soul permanently to do your will. This is a little more heavy sorcery kind of stuff. It can be bound as a servant, or it can be bound as a friend. But this person might accompany you wherever you go. They would even make little travel-sized pieces of it that they could keep in their belt when they don't have the actual one with them, a portable, So that's what these tattoos represent. How many servants does this man have? He has 4. He has 4 servants. So now you know about that. There are marks for spiritual protection. This is another picture of Apohon. Oh, she's so cute. Now, if you look, do you see any tattoos on her?
On her forehead.
On her forehead. She's got tattoos on her forehead. We're going to get back to that. First, we're going to talk about paku paku, fern designs. In Hawaiian, what's the word for fern? Kupu kupu or kupu? You just switch the letters around, you get the Filipino word for it. Fern designs are used to dispel evil. These are tattoos to dispel evil or evil spirits. In some of our rituals, now you know how ferns grow. They kind of grow, they start out all coiled up like this, right? And as they grow, they kind of unfurl. What happens is when a person is sick and the sickness is caused by a malevolent entity, a mangmangkik, or it's a ghost, what they will do is they will take that curled up fern frond and in front of the patient, unroll it and say, just as the energy is being released from this fern, you'll be released from the spirit. And so the fern is to dispel negative entities. On healers, people who are healers, they might receive those self-same marks, but they're oriented differently. They're usually oriented downwards. This is oriented upwards, so it's for that person's healing, but the healer has them turned around, and that shows that they are the ones that perform the healing. So sometimes there is a literacy to our tattooing. If the design is pointed up, it means one thing. If it's pointed down, it means another thing. If it's pointed to the left or to the right, it means another thing. And so we don't haphazardly tattoo these designs. Or this looks good on the body, let's do that. There's a reason for why things are oriented the way they are. So that's one of the designs that we use. Now this is the Ling Ling Ao, the forehead marks. Sometimes they're even put on the nose, on the very tip of the nose, or underneath the eyes. The Ling Ling Ao are used when a person is being afflicted by a malevolent entity. It is a way to change their appearance so that they're not the same person anymore. Often they'll change their name as well, so that that spirit doesn't recognize them anymore, doesn't follow them anymore. There are other designs that we have that are used to confuse spirits. Some of them they're a lot more intricate, but we don't have time to talk about those today. So these are designs that are used to negate those harmful effects that happen from spirits. The last little bit that I'd like to tell you about is tattoos for getting rid of spirits altogether. Those other tattoos, the Ling Ling Ao, the fern designs, those are to get spirits away from the person. There's other spirits that like to get into a person. And let me get a drink here and then I'll tell you. This is a stingray barb. This is one of the tools that we use for tattooing. And if you came to the lecture last night, Kili Imakua was talking about how certain bones are used for tattooing. Human bones, pig bones, mole or albatross bones, because they convey certain qualities. They pass on the quality of the person, the animal, onto the recipient. Why would we use a stingray barb? Well, how many of you have ever heard of an aswang? Okay, what is an aswang? It's like a Filipino vampire.
Yeah, there's different kinds of.
There's different kinds, there's different classes, from the horrific to the subtle. The aswang is a life drainer. It's a vampiric entity. It can be a human. There are humans, there are people in the Philippines that will train you to become an aswang. You can learn how to do it. It's not a profession you'd want to go into. According to legend, according to our beliefs, this is the only thing that will kill them, is the stingray barb. Killed Steve Irwin, crocodile hunter. That's the very same thing. Went up into his heart. Not saying he's an aswang, but this is what killed him. This is a front view of it. We carved them into 2 points at the end. If you can kind of see that, it's cut into 2 points. The barbs are actually stripped off of that because you don't want this getting lodged in a person's skin. But we use this tool for really fine detail work sometimes, and sometimes it's more purposeful to get rid of things, to get rid of vampiric entities. So let's look at this picture here. This is a tattoo that is not happy. It's only unhappy in one spot. So I had a friend I have a friend that stretches for me, and he referred a woman to me who was a Haole woman who was adopted into a Hawaiian family. I'm not going to mention names or anything because I don't want to embarrass her or the family. But she was hanai'd into this Hawaiian family, and the woman who hanai'd her passed away. And so she wanted to get something in memorial for her adopted mother. And so she came to me and she said, you know, I would like to, you know, have this tattoo done in remembrance of this woman and her family. And so I said, okay, let's go ahead and do it. And I don't want anything really big, you know, maybe like this big on my leg down here. Okay, yeah, we can do that. We can do that. So, you know, the cause was noble for her to receive the tattoo. She was doing it for the right reasons. But when I pulled out the pagi, the simani pagi, the stingray bar, and I began tattooing her, it became very painful for her. Oh! The rest of the time, so I stopped using it. I used a different tool, and she tolerated that. But anytime I pulled that stingray barb out, she would suffer, to the point that she began, at the very end, I made 4 little dots, and she screamed bloody murder for each one. And this was in my home. It's not in a tattoo parlor. This is in my home. I don't really tattoo in tattoo parlors because I do ritual tattoo. In my home, my kids in the other room, and here's this woman screaming for 4 little dots. We finish the tattoo. She goes home and sends me this picture a few days later. It's not healing lane. Oh, well, my rational brain kicks in, and I think, well, maybe it's infected. Maybe the tool wasn't clean. That would be really bad on my part. It's, you know, bad for my practice. Well, why don't you scrub it? Put some Neosporin on it, clean it out with peroxide, put some Neosporin on it, and let's check it in a few days. She sends me another picture a few days later. It looks the same. A few more days go by. It looks the same. Something is wrong here. So I called up my friend who referred her to me. I said, what do you know about this woman? She says, well, you know, she's spiritual, she's a good person. I said, everywhere I've tattooed her with the simani pagi, it's inflamed and pissed off. Is she associated with an aswang? He goes, oh, I think I know who it is. I think it's her partner that she just broke up with. And so I called up the woman and I said, sister, I explained to her what an aswang is. I explained to her what the stingray barb is for. And I said, have you cut it off with this woman? We're really just taking a break. We're not really broken up. We're just taking a break. I said, and I was bold. I said, you need to totally cut it off from this woman. And then gave her a prescription of things to do to break that off. She said, I'll do it. Did that. Next day, tattoo looks better. And healed up bright. If it's okay, Lopaka, I have one more story, if that's okay.
Absolutely. Waiting for that story.
Okay. This was done earlier this year. Small tattoo right here on the wrist. I go, this is in San Francisco, and I was up there doing a lecture at the University of San Francisco, and I had an appointment to tattoo this woman. And a couple days before, I just had this feeling of foreboding. I didn't want to tattoo her, and I couldn't put my finger on it. Well, I feel really pressured to do this, but I don't want to tattoo her. And I was feeling so disturbed about it that I was about to call her that morning and cancel it. But during my morning meditation, which I often do before I tattoo, that little inner voice came to me in the back of my head and said, you need to help her because you can. I didn't know what I was getting into. I said, and so actually out loud, I said, okay, I'll do it. I traveled to her house, and when I walked to into the house, didn't feel right inside. She's part of the leather community. Do I need to explain what the leather community is? BDSM? Okay. Her madam was in the back room. Partner says, can you help her? She said, and the woman herself says, I need help. I need this tattoo. Why do you need it? Well, I'm just really insecure about things, and I have a lot of anxiety, and I don't feel real comfortable around people sometimes, and I'm thinking to myself, smoke screen. I pull the partner aside and I say, well, so what's going on? And partner says, can't really put my finger on it, but there's something wrong with her. And so I talk to the woman again. I say, okay, so where did you feel like this tattoo needs to go? She says, right here on top of my wrist, right there. And I look at the partner, and the partner goes. And then and the woman that I was about to work on looks at her and goes, where do you think it should go? Where you put all of your pain and all of your sorrow on the inside of your wrist. No. It's too sore there. It's my skin's thin there. I don't want it there. But the partner was insistent, and almost like this nonverbal dialogue was going on, like, if you don't do this, I'm going to leave you, kind of thing. And so she said, okay, fine. We'll put it right here. Not the most ideal of circumstances to be tattooed. Tension in the room. So I do all my protocols. I do my chants. I do my prayers. We sit down, we begin tattooing. At first she's like, she's taking deep breaths. Goes from growling to laughing to crying to yelling to screaming, and now I know what I'm dealing with. Somebody else in there fighting me the whole time. My poor stretcher just holding on for all he's worth to hold that skin tight. The partner is holding her. We finally finished the design. It's not my best work because she's moving around. But when we finally finish the design, she calms down. And the spirit is gone. Unfortunately, and this is what I told her partner, and I told her the same thing. I said, what was afflicting you is gone. But unless you take steps to protect yourself, it will come back. There's something in your life that you need to correct. Otherwise, this entity is going to be drawn back to you. And so that's one of the cases where I tattooed and there was a possession at play. I've done others. I've tattooed people where the ink won't go into a spot on the body. The tool is sharp. There's plenty of ink on the tool. I can hit it hard. Nothing goes in. And then, but the entity is removed, then the ink will go. So you just learned about a few of our designs. Yes?
Can I ask about that? Did you choose that design for her wrist, or did she?
I did.
You did.
In our tattooing, you don't choose what you get.
Can you
So, go back.
Could you tell us about that? I mean, what the meaning of it is?
Okay, so there's a few different meanings, but I'll tell you about this part here. This part here, the open triangles, are a tooth design. They're crocodile teeth. On a male, crocodile teeth represent his personal ferocity, his power, his ability to bite things or people. But on a woman, it's different. On a woman, it means she's protected. That if any harm were to happen to her, she would be bitten. I mean, they would be bitten. So this is a protective device here. These filled-in triangles, which in Hawaiian tradition, that would be the teeth, the filled-in triangles. That represents the back scales of a crocodile. When it's swimming through the water, you don't see the whole animal, you just see the back spines. And it represents that the spirit is present but not necessarily seen. And that you have to pay heed to that so that you can receive the blessing. So that's what this part of the design means here. This part of the design is for, long story short, faith that you will come out on the other side of the storm and make landfall. We have a lot of oceanic references in our culture and also in our tattoo. So this represents water. This is a water design, but it's also Pinolikau design, which means to get lost. Not that you get lost per se, but those that follow you will get lost. That the spirits that follow after you would get lost. These little V-shaped designs are birds. They're flying down to the unseen islands, which are down here. And because the Earth is round, if you're not within X amount of miles of the land, you don't see it. Figuratively, it's underwater. It's in the underworld. As you sail towards those islands, they rise up out of the horizon, figuratively fished up out of the waters. That's Maui's fish hook there. It's not a literal fish hook. It's his ability as a navigator to pull up islands out of the sea is what a navigator does on the canoe. They sail towards the island rises up out of the horizon because the Earth is round. So the islands being underneath the water part of the design, and it's for her perspective, but when she looks at it, the islands are underwater. And and in many of the stories, there are many stories of, in the Philippines anyway, of Maui getting across the horizon, getting through the storm so that he can find the land. And so that is a reminder to her that when hardship happens, if she perseveres, she'll make her unseen landfall or goal. So that's the design in a nutshell.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Comments? So you just learned about a few designs, a few of the stories that go along with those designs. And for us, there are many, many more. There's literally thousands of years of history that's locked up in these designs. Can't do that in 1 hour. But my admonition to you is just to remember that the most destructive aspect of colonization is discounting our ancestors' wisdom. What we dismiss as superstition may have a basis in fact, as we've heard from Allison and some of our other speakers. So it's important for us not to dismiss what our grandparents taught us, to dismiss that as just silly superstitions or wives' tales. We look hard enough, we dig deep enough, we find the truth of it all. So, regardless of your ethnic group, you might be Filipino, you might be Hawaiian, you might be Portuguese, you might be Chinese, you might be Haole. My admonition is search for your ancestors. Search for that multitude of beings that have a vested interest in your welfare. Those are the spirits that you want to associate with. Those are the ones that will help you, that can guide you, that can protect you in times of need, that can lead you into abundance. And if you search for your ancestors, they find you. Thank you.
So before we get started with